All right. Hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. Good morning to those of you who might be tuning in from other parts of the world. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Gabriel. And today we're going to be diving straight into this week's topic, which is around the AI tax. And when I talk about the AI tax, this is really more around the subtler hidden taxes that are having an impact on us as human beings as AI is accelerating. And so we'll look at how the more tangible elements have been shifting, changing, taking shape. And then we're going to look at essentially how that moves into the hidden layers of our day-to-day experience. And just as a heads up, since this is going to be recorded, I did manage to celebrate my 40th recently, which was a lot of fun, but also had a very interesting subsequent event, which put me out of commission for about a week, experiencing symptoms similar to dengue. Luckily, it wasn't dengue, but it was literally bedridden for most of last week. Pretty wild. But I did enjoy at least the birthday and really just ready for this next chapter. And I wasn't able to get to the usual weekly video in the previous week. So this week, I'll do my best to um, catch us up to the best of my abilities. All right. So let's get into it. Now, I'll try and make this a little bit larger as well so you can see. All right. And make sure we have the right slides. So we're going to be covering three different elements today, and that includes the weights, the data side, and the compute side. All of these are actually really important, but I think what most people are missing right now when people are talking about AI are how these aspects of AI are mirroring a lot of things that we can find in ourselves, right? And in our local conscious technologist meetups, if you're not familiar with the conscious technologist movement, just go to conscioustechnologist.com. You can learn more about that. But we talk about how since AI is trained on human data, it already has a bias towards creating things that human beings would. However, because there is an autonomous part to this, there are new capabilities that are, of course, going to come out of all of this, which may enable AI to essentially shed a lot of the original training data that it was fed. Now, that bias may always be there, but the bias can be changed. And once you start to understand this, you can actually start to correlate that with your own weights, your own data as a human being, because the language is becoming quite similar, right? You have some billionaires, many folks in tech who are already looking at human beings as software parts, right? So you can start to see the same software language, engineering language being applied to biologics or biological beings like ourselves. And so in today's talk, we're going to be looking at the news items related to weights, right? How the models have evolved. The data side is we're going to look at the shifting landscape of data and how it's becoming more valuable, especially now within the sort of AI arc. And then the compute, the importance of compute right now. Okay, so as I mentioned when we opened up, right, it's not just about AI right now. It is about what AI is doing to us as human beings, not just from a mental cognitive standpoint, but also from a conscious standpoint. And I did a lightning talk previously around this about how the real the real sort of future of tech lies with consciousness itself. And a lot of people don't see this yet because they're treating consciousness as completely separate. Um, but that might also be due to the fact that there are so many competing theories around consciousness in general, right? So, consciousness aside, right, as its own philosophical topic, we can start to at least look at how we are consciously applying AI today, right, and how we cannot be consumed by it as things accelerate. So, point number one, right, the tax around AI has moved from intelligence to memory. What do we mean by that? Well, the latest news has been around Quen, Anthropic, and even Notion, right? So, from a Quen standpoint, let's take a look at the latest news. They recently released their model, which is Quen 3.8. And you also see here, right? This is a 27 billion parameter model. And it essentially puts it on par with Fable 5 and beyond for a fraction of the cost. And you can see here, right? There's a lot of folks on Twitter who are just going ham with the model. Because what Quen and a lot of the Chinese models are doing is allowing you to pretty much download these models straight onto your own machines and run them locally, right? So this is the wild part. Um, so we've got all these examples of people using Quen to develop things that are on par with Fable, right? With the US models from just a few months ago, maybe even a few weeks. Okay. So it's getting really interesting. Things are heating up. And I think most people can't even get the most out of these more advanced models that are coming out now. So if you are watching this and if you are somebody who's non technical, do not worry too much about these newer models coming out. Literally, the older models are probably going to be more suited to your needs, right? Because it's not just about keeping up with the Joneses, right, of AI. It's about understanding what your own needs are, whether that be personal or professional, and then using the most appropriate model for you and those needs. All right. Next, we got Anthropic. Okay. So, Anthropic walked back data retention. Let's take a look at Anthropic. Now, there were some issues recently. Now, the watermark issues is one, but let's take a look at the data retention. All right. So, OpenAI and Anthropic just folded on their data retention policy after Palantir CEO exposed their real business model, Alex Karp. Now, it's ironic that Palantir is coming out, ringing the alarm bells against Anthropic and OpenAI, because Palantir, if you're not familiar with them, have been notorious for spying on a lot of people through their technologies. So, yeah, is it the kettle? What's the saying? The pot calling the kettle black, something like that. Um, but yeah, you can see here, right? Something has gone completely wrong. They want access to my data so they can build my alpha. I'm going to get no value, blah, blah, blah. So OpenAI started testing private safety processing to avoid retaining customer data. Today, Anthropic reversing course will allow enterprise customers to keep data on their own cloud infrastructure instead of Anthropic's, because previously they were just like forcing it. Everybody had to give these two companies their data, right? So look at this. Sovereignty is the future. Welcome, OpenAI. This is wild, right? So let this simmer. Okay, these big tech companies, the big AI companies, are gonna battle it out amongst themselves. Okay, then we've got Notion and their skills, the release of their new skills feature. Now, this might seem like nothing on the surface, but this is actually really important to take into consideration because Notion, and I've said this actually for a while now, Notion is a dark horse in the AI harness race. They weren't listed among most of the frontier model conversations because they didn't have frontier models. But now that the frontier models are being sort of pushed out by the cheaper Chinese options, Notion has been able to capitalize on this and essentially create a harness that allows you to choose multiple models, not just one, right? The when you are with ChatGPT or Claude, you are literally just stuck with their models for the most part. Notion, however, allows you to tap into their platform that's been around for years, right? Their knowledge base, their second brain, whatever you want to call it, however you use it. But now you can actually select a whole bunch of the latest US models and also the Chinese models straight from within Notion. And the skills library means that all this skill stuff, all the technical aspects around it that Anthropic and OpenAI have been, sort of trying to teach the market about, you don't even have to get complicated with that anymore. Literally inside of Notion, they've made skills a simple feature. And now that you have this feature, you can essentially just invoke a skill inside of Notion using the forward slash. And this one behavior is changing a lot for people, right? You can see here, new use skills with local agents. Keep your skills in Notion as your source of truth, then download them to Cloud Code, Codex, Cursor, blah, 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 right? So this is making Notion a lot more interoperable um, with other platforms. And I think this is one to watch. Notion, I believe, are the dark horse. Okay, next up, the tax, right? So wherever the prompt lives, whether this is the latest version, put the behavior where the work already lives. So this is essentially related, right, to how the taxes move from intelligence to memory. And when it comes to the task at hand for AI, there is a reduction in the cognitive tax by consolidating a lot of what you're doing, right? So I mentioned Notion, right, and the skills in the slash command and how they're positioning themselves as a harness for you to use over some of the other alternatives. And by doing this, they're reducing the cognitive tax of knowledge workers who have been maybe roped into trying to learn everything that Anthropic and OpenAI have been trying to teach. And platforms or companies like Notion are essentially saying, hey, you know what? We can just pull these things straight into what you're already used to. And for those who have ever worked in digital transformation, you'll know that this is actually super useful because it just reduces the amount of time spent on trying to educate a market. If you use what's familiar, it just reduces the tax, right? So, door number two, seeing stopped being enough, right? So, what does this mean? Well, we've got two news pieces. We've got Google and then we've got OpenAI. Let's take a look at it. So, on the Google front, Google makes visible Gemini watermarks optional. Now, I mentioned Anthropic before, right? So, Anthropic did do sort of double back on the data retention stuff, but they were also under fire recently for publicly announcing their watermarking feature in compliance with EU laws. And that caused a lot of uproar, especially on platforms like X, where it's just common to do that. But it did give rise to concern for people who had no idea that watermarking was already taking place. Now, to be fair, I didn't know that all this watermarking was taking place in the manner that it has been. And Anthropic wasn't the first to do this, right? Google and so many others have actually been doing this already. And it's really subtle and almost insidious, but the watermarks are essentially done in a way whereby they will adjust the weights inside of their models in such a way that whenever their models are used to generate outputs, they can actually reverse engineer the output text to see the patterns of the influence of their weights, right, on those outputs. And so this is very interesting because that means that they are influencing the way that tokens are generated when you're using their models. Okay. So this is how it begins. It might have been a technical reason that they did this at first, but they are essentially adjusting your conscious awareness without you even realizing. Now, this has already been happening before AI, just so you know, right? It's also known as social engineering. But this is weights engineering at a very subtle level. Because if you're using AI more and more and more and more, you are going to be subtly influenced by these weight adjustments from each of these companies. Okay. The next part, Gemini watermarks optional, and then ChatGPT for teens. So ChatGPT for teens. So this is interesting. This is a bit of a kind of like a eyebrow raising moment. Built for learning, backed by protections. It's kind of an oxymoron with ChatGPT, but you know, I understand that they do need to put all these things in to protect the teens with their models, and this is what OpenAI has released. So if you are a parent and you do have concerns around safety, ChatGPT has released some things to make it safer, seemingly on the surface for teens. But if you also know anything about teens, they always find a way around a lot of this. So there are all these open source models, which they are probably aware of, and they're probably going to be um, getting their hands on if they can. Okay. So, yeah, when I was talking about the watermarking, right? The convincingness, right? We already are familiar with AI sycophancy, right? Where AI is sort of engineered to be agreeable, at least in earlier models, maybe even more so now with some of the more popular vendors. But this convincingness aspect can cause issues in the long run, also, right? And you can see here, right, written fluent enough that you stop checking. Name the stop line before anything ships, sends, or decides. So what this is saying is that AI can be super convincing on the surface, right? So much so that you stop checking and you're just like, you know what, it's good enough, I'll let it go. And that's the sort of subtle influence in engineering on your behavior over time because AI doesn't stop, it just keeps going. And eventually it wears you down to the point where you're like, you know what, I don't care enough anymore. It takes too much time, too much thought power. I'm just going to leave it. And then you do. And so you need to be aware of where you want to intentionally or consciously stop things for an AI so that you can ship, send, and decide properly. And then also know what you want your AI or agents um, to do for you on your behalf while you still knowing enough um, to check things if you ever need to. All right. Door number 3, the body of AI is land, power, and books. So these were the news items. NVIDIA. So let's take a look at this news item. NVIDIA, Ohio. So they have secured land. NVIDIA and OpenAI are nearing a deal to finance a 10 gigawatt data center campus in Ohio, but have reworked the deal so that NVIDIA would initially guarantee half of the planned campus rather than all of it. So very interesting. They've downsized their plans for a $250 billion guarantee of data centers. You can see here. I mean, NVIDIA is just sitting at the center of all this, which is wild to me, right? Like, because they're just letting all the AI companies battle it out amongst themselves, and they don't care so long as they buy compute from NVIDIA, right? Or their chips and stuff. So this was a news item that I thought was very interesting because it's showing how physical land, still matters in this AI game. As you're using AI, do not for 1 minute think that the physical side of things is not playing a part in all this. Okay. Amazon books cut apart for training. So Amazon books. Let's have a look here. So Amazon has been buying up lots of rare and out of print books in large batches. And yeah, the main story around this is that it's not just Amazon, FYI, but a lot of companies have essentially been buying in bulk a lot of books, old rare ones too, scanning them digitally, then essentially discarding and destroying the books that they scanned. Now, you can see here, once the text is digitized, the physical books are destroyed, right? And so again, it's not just Amazon. Anthropic also came under fire for this. Yeah, you can see here, this is exactly what Anthropic did to train everyone's fave ethical AI. So, but it's a practice, and apparently by law, they have to do this. So, that's some nuance to the story. But this is very interesting that these big tech companies are just like destroying books after they've digitized them, right? So that means that they get to keep the knowledge, which is wow. There's just like this weird um, loop, right? It's like we had all these books and it was all about digitizing, and then now the large tech digital firms are going back to scan all those old books and then destroy those books. Yeah, makes you wonder, right? So if that body runs on power, yours still runs on attention, right? So AI is all about the electric side, right? The compute. So these data centers, and these data centers need land and lots of water. So as all of this is happening, your attention is also being fought for through the weights of the AI models. And the attention aspect is what's really interesting here, right? Because this is how humans become a conduit between the the physical aspects or the physical requirements for data centers, and then how AI uses the data to warp or shift our attention as we're using it, right? And so we need to be very aware of this as it's all happening so that we don't just become slaves to a new type of technology, right? Um, oh, yes. And so this week, actually releasing the AI Foundations course. So if you didn't hear about this already, there is an AI Foundations course that I'd sent out to my list. And this is specifically for conscious technologists. Okay. So conscioustechnologists.com. This is for the groups of people who follow my work or have been following my work who want to use technology more consciously. So this isn't just somebody who is interested in the next hyped up tool or the next bunch of prompts. It's about people who understand the tech, but also understand what is truly at stake as human beings. And so this particular course is really for those who want more than just surface level, what I call prompt layer um, education. This is about learning to see the patterns underneath. I have, 15 plus year in essentially digital pattern recognition, which has allowed me to be able to um, stay ahead of each new tech wave, position myself, and just always being able to ride each new tech wave properly. With AI, it's a very interesting one because this wave, if I was to look at all of these sort of tech waves as waves, right? The AI tech wave is a tsunami wave in terms of speed and immensity. And it is so large and powerful that you cannot actually ride this wave. You, as human beings, we actually need to go beneath the waves now, right? To use the analogy of being out in the ocean itself. And we have to kind of go to the source of what's generating these waves because that is what is more closely aligned with us as human beings. And if you see a lot of people who are just trying to keep up, I keep saying this, you cannot keep up with AI. The speed is a silicon speed. We, as human beings, are carbon based. So the carbon speed is intentionally slow or slower. Okay. That's not to say that there aren't some human beings who can operate at fast speeds, but just take a look at what's happening to their cognition as they try to keep up with silicon speed, right? This is where it is not about, the faster horse. It's essentially about a completely new type of machine or approach to all this. And this is what we teach. So if you are somebody who does understand what I'm talking about, because it's not for everybody, then highly recommend you check out this page. Um, you know, Pretty transparent. This is the price. People have been enrolling for this already. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll put this in the chat for anyone who's interested. And since it's going to be recorded and then republished on YouTube, this is just a good time to take into consideration, right, everything I just shared this week, because we're really at interest. at an interesting junction, right, as a species. And so, at the beginning, we talked about how the tax part, right, when it comes to AI, it becomes a cognitive tax, right? That's kind of what I lead with when we're talking about taxes. There's a cognitive tax with AI because it's just a bombardment or a massive tsunami of data that keeps coming at us. And so even when you're generating AI outputs, right, or you're receiving from an AI, there are some techniques that you can even use, like this caveman prompt. This one is a very cool one that I came across, right? Um, so you should tell Claude, ChatGPT, etc., to talk to you like a caveman. I'm being dead serious. It's the whole caveman prompt from, and it cuts token usage by 75%. And you don't even need all of this, right? It can be useful, but what I actually do, so imagine I'm just talking to an AI. I just say, reply to me in caveman talk. That's literally all I say, and it's good enough. And it literally will just talk to you in short caveman-like responses, and you save in tokens. Interestingly enough, right? So discernment now becomes the human part in all this. Your taste, your experience, your lived experiences as a human being is what allows you to ask certain questions via certain prompts to an AI to get certain results. So intelligence in the future as well is not going to be just about how much you know. It's about how you apply what you know through the form and shape of your questions or prompts to an AI. And that's where human beings will be able to judge each other, not just from the results, because when we see results, we'll be like, okay, what was the prompt that you asked that got you that result? That is going to be more important than just the result itself. And it comes back now to the question, which is the realm of philosophy. And this is why, we see AI companies even hiring philosophers now, because they realize for human beings, it really is more about the question now, not the answers. Okay, so that's a recap for the last week, August 17 to 24. Um, Capability got cheap. Discernment is the scarce resource now, right? As a human being. So, yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me just stop the screen share. And Fraser, thanks for making it. You're at the tail end of all this, but yeah, the I guess the last how many minutes? 27 minutes. Trying to keep these shorter because usually I can. Oh, I'll face the camera here. I usually end up getting carried away with all the content that's available with this. But from an AI front, right now, again, as I've been talking about over the last half hour, AI has really warped a lot of our experiences, our expectations, and we are also retraining it or reinforcing a lot of these things as well. Uh, Take, for example, just writing, right? How many of you have seen a lot of linguistic patterns that you see from an AI show up in people's actual writing and even the way that they're starting to speak, right? So, like one sentence, and this changes everything, right? That's a sentence that I'm seeing in YouTube videos a lot too. And as soon as I hear that, I can spot it and I'll know, yep, this guy used a YouTube script that he created using AI. And human beings, we're kind of good that way because once we get familiar with the thing, we start to pay attention and then question the source, right? Um, a- Animations, another really good example, right? They had the uncanny valley, and in the evolution of computer graphics and animation, audiences got more and more used to realistic animation. We got used to being able to spot what looked real and what didn't. I remember when Jurassic Park came out and other subsequent films, things that we back then might have seen as, oh my God, this is super crazy, realistic computer graphics and animation. 10, 20 years later, you look back at that and you go, wow, that looks really crap now. Right? But it's because we have become used to a certain level, right? And it's like we are trained um, through patterns. And so the same is happening in AI. So before it might have been just purely visual. Now we're going to start training ourselves via pattern recognition with AI too. But this means that we have to actually start sitting within our bodies more and feeling some of these AI responses. Now, This is stuff I cover in our courses for conscious technologists, but it's hopefully something that you can start thinking about for the week, right? How can you actually start to train your body to sense things that you're experiencing with AI online? Because, as an example, I was sharing this with an attendee of one of our last meetups, but I was sharing with him how with certain AI video, I can feel certain things in my bodies that lets me know that it is AI or not. And this isn't just a visual thing. With AI, there's something deeper. And I don't know, this might be because of the way that I have trained my own body to sense this through each new tech wave, but it is a thing. And I'll probably write a blog post about this or a newsletter because I think it's worth talking about. But our biology, AI is kind of pushing us to move back into our bodies and to sense things more so that we aren't so disconnected as we have become while using our devices and our technologies from nature itself, right? The thing about the physical world and slowing down is that you can take the time to pay attention to what's happening in your body. But tech, AI in general, can simply bypass that by just flooding our senses with speed and just volume. So that's something to think about. But for those of you that tuned in, thank you so much for joining. If you had any questions, you're always welcome to ask away. Otherwise, I will republish this video, and you'll find it on my Substack. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.